Hace muchos, muchos años, en un país muy lejano y triste, existió una enorme montaña de piedra negra y áspera. Al caer la tarde, en la cima de esa montaña, florecía todas las noches una rosa que otorgaba la inmortalidad. Sin embargo, nadie se atrevía a acercarse a ella, pues sus numerosas espinas estaban envenenadas.
Pan's Labyrinth is a film that's directed by Guillermo Del Toro. That came out in 2007. So Pan's Labyrinth was the winner of the monthly subscriber poll that I put out. And I want to thank everybody for casting their votes on which film that they wanted me to watch and review. I believe it got over 130 votes, which I am really proud of. And I appreciate every single last one of you. That's why I put out these polls every month now, because I want all of my subscribers, all of my Kino lords to feel truly appreciated, because I really do appreciate you guys, and I love you all so damn much. So I actually have a really familiar and close connection to Pan's Labyrinth. Pan's Labyrinth was a film that I watched way back in middle school, and loved it way back in middle school, and I watch it frequently. Like, I think I've seen Pan's Labyrinth at least over 20 times now, and that's actually being modest. I've probably seen it even more than that. So I've seen it many times, but in preparation for this review, I still gave it another watch just to have it fresh in my mind. But with all that being said, Pan's Labyrinth was a film that I was truly kind of appalled by, because I obviously expected something that was more adult-like, but I went into the film expecting more of just the kind of fantasy, mystical element that the trailer of this film offers. And then I remember seeing it in middle school and being like, holy shit, this is a really unforgivingly brutal film that is completely unafraid to really go down these harsh roads and really give audiences something that is truly honest and is rooted to reality. And I really appreciated that film even back then. I still highly appreciate that about this film now. And before I really dive so much into this film, let me just say I had recently watched a previous Guillermo Del Toro film called The Devil's Backbone, and that's a film that also takes place in Spain, and honestly has a lot of similarities in terms of the approach to Pan's Labyrinth, because it's like a historical drama that also includes children, and there's also this kind of supernatural horror element. Definitely with The Devil's Backbone, it's going for more supernatural horror than it is fantasy, but the supernatural element in The Devil's Backbone, don't get me wrong, I think the film is good. I think it's a good film. But the supernatural element, I feel, kind of gets sidelined and doesn't really feel like it's really all that focused on. But with Pan's Labyrinth, the supernatural fantasy element of this film feels like it's definitely embedded to the spirit of this film and is essential to its overall foundation and approach. It doesn't at all feel like something that you could just remove and either the film be enhanced or if the film still have the same spirit. With The Devil's Backbone, I feel like you could actually remove the horror element and still have something that even perhaps could have been better, to be honest with you. But with Pan's Labyrinth, that is obviously not the case. I think he truly mastered what he was going for here in Pan's Labyrinth in terms of incorporating this fantasy element to it. And I'm sure like 90 to 95% of the people watching this right now have already seen the film. So in this review, I'm not gonna, like, this isn't a spoiler review where I'm gonna like dive deep into everything that happens in the film. But as I'm reviewing it and discussing it, I might bring up a spoiler here and there. So just fair warning, if you haven't seen this film, I would highly suggest you watch this film first before watching this video, because just me rambling and talking about it, I might stumble across a few spoilers. So I'm going to start this review off by talking about my absolute favorite aspect of this film. My favorite aspect of this film has to be the fact that it's incredibly interpretive. This film is crafted in such an intentional and delicate way that you could have multiple interpretations to it and both of them be valid. Obviously, I have kind of my own interpretation of this, and it's the interpretation that this little girl, the main character of the film named Ophelia, has crafted this really elaborate fantasy to cope with the harsh realities of war that's surrounding her. And I know that may be the easy interpretation, but I just feel like the film gives a lot of hints to support that. But again, the beautiful thing is, this film also kind of gives hints the other way around. The only reason why I'm kind of going with my interpretation is because I feel like it's more consistent with this film's themes that has a lot to do with dealing with the harshness of reality, martyrdom, the beauty of cherishing and maintaining the imaginative innocence of children. So that's the reason why I kind of go with my interpretation. But as I said, that is why I think this film, or at least one of the biggest reasons why I think this film is so incredibly special, is because it depends on who's watching it and depends on what they pick up that influences what they decide this film was going for in its conclusion. And the performances in this film are all around excellent. The main character, played by Ivana Baquero, excellent choice in casting. Not only do I think that she obviously has the talent to do it, but she just has this unique, iconic type face that you feel like you would see in a fairy tale movie. But yeah, either way, she knocks it out of the park. She really has to express a range of emotions in this film. And she was completely convincing in her performance, especially for an actress who I believe at the time was 11 years old. She absolutely killed it. Then you have other actors who are also excellent in this film, like Maribel Verdu, who I'm familiar with from Y Tu Mamá También. If y'all haven't seen that film, I highly suggest it. It's a great fucking movie. But she killed it in Y Tu Mamá También and also kills it in this film. Again, has to show a wide range of emotions. And you really do buy the frustration and the sadness and the hardship that she's going through in this film, because this is somebody that also feels trapped, maybe not as trapped as Ophelia's character, but is still somebody who desperately wants to find a way out and live a life of dignity and liberty. And then you have the villain in this movie. I think his name is Sergi Lopez. This guy's fucking menacing in this film. Not only is he like just the epitome of human garbage in this film, but he's so convincing as this fascist lunatic that it's just so full of narcissism, and he just reeks of it this entire fucking movie. And apparently this actor, like, I'm not familiar with him at all, but apparently in Spain, he was mostly known for being a comedic actor, so I think a lot of people assumed that he wouldn't really have the chops to do this kind of role. But if that's the case, they were wrong, because he really sold himself in this. And that was like one of the main things I do remember when I first watched this in middle school, was thinking like, damn, this guy is a vicious asshole. You have that one scene where he's basically doing this sadistic torture session of somebody who has a stuttering issue and a speech impediment. I have a pretty bad speech impediment. It might not seem that way because I'm cutting the fucking video all the time, but if you met me in real life, you would know. But just seeing that scene, it doesn't matter how many times I've seen this film, that scene alone will always provoke a reaction out of me. There's also that other scene that breaks my heart, where the villain character shoots the doctor in the back as he's walking away. And just the way that entire scene is shot, I think, is just masterfully done. And again, works for me on an emotional level. But yeah, beyond the heavy emotions that you feel with certain scenes in this film, it's also quite terrifying. I definitely wouldn't, like, if I had kids, I don't, but I do have younger siblings, and when I was watching this, I was like, I kind of want to show this to them, but I don't think they're there yet. I think they're like in 5th grade. I personally probably wouldn't show this to anybody unless they were over the age of 12 or 13. Even that's kind of pushing it. But yeah, I say that because there are some terrifying scenes in this film. The big iconic one that's obviously going to come to mind is the scene with the pale man with the eyeballs on his hands. I don't know if it's called the pale man or the thin man. I've seen people call it different things. I'll just go with the pale man because that just seems more appropriate to me. But yeah, that scene and the suspense that is built in that scene is so fucking terrifying. And it doesn't matter how many times that I have seen that scene. It always gets something out of me. And it's like, I know the result. I know that she doesn't get eaten by this fucking guy. But it just seems like no matter how many times I see it, I'm still like on the edge of my seat. And that's because of just obviously brilliant direction from Guillermo Del Toro. Brilliant makeup and costume design who, by the way, was played by Doug Jones. Doug Jones plays the Pale Man, but also plays the Fawn in this film. And I've heard a lot of crazy shit about what he had to go through in terms of playing the Fawn character, especially. I'm not knowledgeable on all the trivia or anything, but what I do know is that apparently he had to kind of walk on stilts. And beyond that, the headpiece was so thick that most of the time he couldn't even hear his co-actors talking and giving their lines. So he had to memorize not only his lines, but everybody else's lines as well, just so he knows how to react, he knows what they're saying already, so he doesn't have to rely on any kind of actual audio cue. And that's something that's crazy. Apparently the horns themselves weigh 10 pounds each, so just imagine being in that type of costume all the time, trying to do your scenes. Sounds like hell, to be honest with you. So yeah, I kind of got a little bit off track, but what the point I was trying to get at is that, yeah, this film is quite terrifying, but it's also a bit terrifying, not only just like in the fantasy monstrous kind of way, but again, there are some really brutal scenes. I mean, there's that famous face smashing scene where the villain character just like mashes this guy's face in with a beer bottle a billion times. And, you know, there's a lot of shit like that in this film that, you know, I don't think, unless you're over the age of 13, is really appropriate for you to watch. Obviously, it goes without saying that the prop work, the makeup, and the special effects is quite stunning. There is one scene where the main character, Ophelia, goes into the tree and encounters the frog, giant bullfrog. That's really one of the only scenes in the film that has that really noticeable early 2000s CGI. So in that regard, like, it's not really perfect, but I'm not even going to really dock it for that, because Guillermo Del Toro apparently gave up offers from America. Apparently Hollywood was offering Guillermo Del Toro to produce the film here in America and have it in English, and the budget would have been doubled. So if it was made here, perhaps he would have had the money to make it a little bit more crisp, but he refused because he didn't want to compromise his original artistic idea. And I think that is just really admirable. And even though that he was going to basically not end up with any money after the production of this, at least until its release and everything else, I think that is quite special for him to deny the money and not get persuaded by the evil reptilians in Hollywood. So apparently this film won 3 different Oscars. It won for Best Achievement in Art Direction, Best Makeup, and Achievement in Cinematography. So all of those are very highly deserved, obviously. The cinematography is definitely deserved because this film's presentation in terms of the camera work is really, really well done. And Guillermo del Toro is usually really good at directing the camera work in his films. Because that was even apparent with The Devil's Backbone. Even though I don't think it's nearly as masterful, you can tell that Del Toro has this really delicate eye for the way he wants the camera to move and how he wants certain things framed, and especially lighting too. Del Toro is somebody who knows a lot about lighting and how he wants his films to be lit. The Devil's Backbone has excellent lighting. Pan's Labyrinth also really masterful lighting. But what kind of baffles me is that it didn't win for Best Foreign Language Film. Apparently, a film called The Lives of Others, which is a German film, won, and I don't ever hear anybody talk about that movie. Not saying it's lesser quality because I've never seen it, but obviously it didn't have nearly as much name recognition or staying power as Pan's Labyrinth. So I don't know if there's any of you guys watching this video who have actually seen The Lives of Others. Let me know your thoughts on it. I've never heard of that film, so I really have no idea. But it just seems like another example of the Oscars probably dropping the ball once again. So I realize I haven't talked about the score yet, which is blasphemy to me right now. But, so the score to this film, I think is quite wonderful because, again, it's kind of crafted in this whimsical fantasy, even lullaby type way that I think really fits the film, and it doesn't come off too overbearing, because one thing I notice about Del Toro films is that he likes his scores and his overall presentation to have this kind of, I don't want to say spectacle, but have this really almost Hollywood-like presentation to it, where it seems like he's incorporating this kind of invisible style where everything seems really well produced and really seamless. And his scores are kind of the same thing. His scores are usually this really grand, really loud type of sounds that comes from an orchestra. And I feel like here in Pan's Labyrinth, it's utilized perfectly. There's nothing about the score I would change, because there's nothing about the score that I think is overbearing, unfitting, or manipulative. And again, the kind of fantasy element to it, I think, is encapsulated incredibly well, and feels like it's definitely incorporated with the overall spirit and theme of this film. But yeah, obviously, I think this film was masterful. It's Del Toro's best film by far, in my opinion. I really haven't seen another film from him that I think even really comes close to how brilliantly crafted this film is. He has a good handful of good films, but this one I just feel like is on a whole other level. So I'm going to give Pan's Labyrinth a 10 out of 10. Thousands upon thousands of people have already talked their heads off about this film, especially on YouTube, so I probably didn't add anything new or refreshing to the discussion or conversation about this film. So for you to still click on this video and actually hear my thoughts on this film really means a lot. But anyways, I thank you all so much for clicking on this video and hearing what I had to say about Pan's Labyrinth. If you really enjoyed what I had to say about the film, please give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.